Namaskar, Shekharji. Welcome and welcome all the guests. Today we are continuing the third session of our short course, The Indian Knowledge Landscape.
Namaste. So today's session we will look into the broader classifications of of the Indian knowledge systems, as well as some of the important sources of these. When we say systems, it covers a wide range of texts which traditionally are called as the Shastras. So let's get into. So before we move deeper into the talk, let's try to understand. So the last two sessions we have been seeing IKS through an historical perspective and in comparison to the other world systems of knowledge. So before we go into today's session, just to reiterate that from the Vedic or from the Indian perspective, the term Vidya and the term Dhi, these are the two terms that have been used to refer to education. And of these two terms, the word Vidya has or it serves a much larger uh, connotation, and it could refer to the acquired brilliance in the form of skills or in the form of understanding of the world around it. But in a finer sense, it could also refer to the experiential wisdom. Whereas the second term, Dhi, is that intuitive wisdom that leads to realization. The intuitive wisdom that leads to understanding about one's own true nature. That is why the term Vidya has been used in texts in the Upanishads and others with a prefix. When it is referring to acquired brilliance, it is called as Aparavidya. And when it is referring to a kind of an intuitive or an experiential wisdom, it is called as Paravidya. So the emphasis has been on both the aspects of Vidya. Whereas when we use the word knowledge in a contemporary setting, it is seen more as an human resource transformation, as a medium for human resource transformation, especially for ensuring employability of the person. Even though on the paper the definition may not sound the same, but in practice, across most of the education institutes world over, including India, this is the practice. So, this employability has been the key focus for education. And there are uh, two kinds of views about education also. The Indian view for in the way India looks or the way Indian traditions looks at uh, education is as a means of not only personal or spiritual upliftment, but as a means for integrating oneself with the society and to the world at large. So this we'll look at these relationship in a little detail. So this has been the traditional view, whereas in the model liberal arts view, wherein you have this art for the art's sake, so knowledge is pursued for its own sake. So it's a kind of an intellectual exploration. It will help us to keep all these perspectives in mind, if not to compare the two, but to understand how the Indic sources approach the whole concept of education themselves. Knowledge was seen as the greatest purifier. In the holy conversation called Bhagavad Gita, we have Bhagavan making this very, very clear to through Arjuna to the world. He declares, Nahi jnanena sadrisham pavitram iha vidyate. O Arjuna, there is nothing else which would purify more than knowledge would. So jnanena sadrisham pavitram. So it was knowledge was always seen as a purifier, as a kind of a means of liberation of various. See, the ultimate aim of human existence has been to get rid of dukkha nivritti. When we ponder on this particular question, we will see that most of our activities are aligned towards this. Now, what is the definition of dukkha nivritti would change from a person to person and the society to society. Whether it means mere survival, or does it mean having a life which ensures certain comforts so that whatever has been considered as uncomfortable can be put away. But ultimately, the aim is to get rid of the discomfort or get rid of pain or sorrow. So all the pursuits have been towards achieving this goal. So the Indic systems have been guided by the texts which we call as the Vedas. A word about Vedas, because I don't propose to go too deep into the classification of the Vedic texts per se, because I feel that in today's context, the understanding the classification at a surface level does not really bring out its true significance. Either we drill deep into it and understand, or we just know from outside uh, the content of the Vedic corpus as a bird's eye view. So the text called Vedas, today the fourfold classification is widely understood: Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, Sama Veda, and the Atharva Veda. These are the four Vedic texts. And each of these Vedas are subdivided into four sections called Samhitas, Brahmanas, Aranyaka, and the Upanishads. Now, the last word Upanishad is more popular today because of the spread of Vedanta. Upanishad is a section of the Veda. So each of it. So Rig Veda has all the four. Yajur Veda has all the four. Like so. The basis for this classification is purely from application point of view. So all the mantras which were directly employed in a Vedic sacrifice or a yajna were classified under the Samhita portion. Brahmana is that section which delineates the usage. So it's a kind of a rule book or a lab manual sort of thing, which tells how and where those mantras from the Samhitas have to be applied. Aranyakas is a kind of a deliberation on the meaning of a few of the mantras. So Aranyakas looks beyond the surface level meaning of the mantra and tries to dwell deeper into its significance. Upanishads being the last section, which is purely about the science of self-enquiry. All these are yajna oriented. The first three sections are yajna oriented, which is action and involvement of a person. So you require a person to be doing all this. So who is the person? What is the nature of that person? So the inquiry about the self forms the last section called the Upanishad. So I'm using this term last and others very loosely because there are a few instances where the Upanishad is not sequentially the last portion. It comes somewhere in between also. But normal understanding, because it is Vedanta, end of the Veda. At times, the word Anta refers to Siddhanta, that is the underlying principle. So Vedanta means the underlying principle of the Veda. That is a better way of understanding the word Vedanta. So this being uh, the structure of the Veda, all the knowledge systems were somehow attached to preserving, studying, and propagating either of or the whole of the Vedic corpus. So it was considered to be the obligation of each and every person to preserve, to study, and to propagate. Even though this will come in detail much later, this is one point that differentiates what we call today or refer today as Hindus from the other dharmic faiths. By dharmic faiths, I refer to the faiths which originated in India, which shares a lot of commonalities with Hinduism, yet they are distinct paths by themselves, such as Jainism and the Buddhism. So the Jainism and the Buddhism, if you observe, they also believe in rebirth. They also believe, obviously, in karma. They also believe in moksha or nirvana. So all these belief systems are shared. But what makes it different is the acceptance or non-acceptance of the authority of the Vedas. The Buddhist and the Jain systems do not accept Vedas as a supreme source of authority, an authoritative source of information. So they are classified apart. They have their own source of what they consider to be valid knowledge. But when we take Vedic texts, they don't accept its validity. They will treat it like any other textbook which should be verified using empirical logic. So that is the difference. So if someone has to call himself as a Hindu or as a Sanatani, Then, as per the ancient definition of it, one has to profess faith in Vedas as the source of true knowledge. You can add to any more text along with Veda. So that is where we have the different schools of practices today. But nobody would be able to deny the validity of the Vedas. Okay. So I think this point is clear. So most of the systems were either developed to preserve. We will see that when we look into the Vedangas and the Darshanas. Systems such as Siksha and Chandas came from a preservation. Okay, so the preservation was their main objective. To study systems such as Mimamsa came for studying. So their principal focus was the study of the Vedic corpus. And systems such as Nyaya, they came, or even Jyotisha, was to propagate this Vedic intellectual heritage. So likewise, the entire knowledge system revolves around the Veda as the core. So that's the principal axis. So when we look into the basis of this Vedic knowledge, so if someone were to ask us what is Vedic knowledge system all about, how does it look at education? The Vedic systems is all about understanding not only the person but also the immediate nature and the people around him and the entire existence, and to live in harmony with it. This is exemplified in mantras such as Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha, Sarve Santu Niramaya. So that survey includes everyone, not just the humans. And there are a few mantras which just makes it even more specific and clear. When it says Sam Chatushpade, Samno Dvipade, Sham Chatushpade. Dvipad is bipeds, all the birds and humans and others. Chatushpad means the quadrupeds, that is the animals. So this Sham is may well-being be or may auspiciousness be. So we are wishing for the welfare of everyone around us. So this is one of the basic uh, nature of the Vedic wisdom. And another important aspect is to pray for the well-being of all from a much larger cosmological point of view. So it is not only the ones that exist in this world that we see, but in any other worlds. So the word Vishwa refers to the whole cosmos, not just to this earth. So now we use this term to refer to earth, but etymologically speaking, it refers to the entire cosmos. So that when we use the mantra Krunvanto Vishwamaryam, we are looking at making the whole world or the whole existence harmonious and peaceful, so that everyone who dwells in it is or finds peace or finds comfort. So our efforts, like I mentioned in the start of the lecture, All of our efforts we can classify under three sections. First is merely living or surviving. So here the efforts is only to earn the physical facility. Then we can raise the bar a little and say living with fulfillment. Now, what this fulfillment is, uh, it is purely subjective. But this, when we raise it to living with fulfillment, it is not mere physical facility, it is physical facility and relationship with people and things around us. The last was the highest goal, living with continuous fulfillment, giving us a sense of peace, bliss, fulfillment, so that we could be uh, independent. Now, all this were taken to its perfection in the Pratyabhijna or the Kashmir Shaivism school. Because not only was the bliss the final goal, what use of bliss if there is no independence? No other system of philosophy, Indian philosophy, promises independence alongside bliss in the state of moksha, other than Kashmir Shaivism. So that Swatantriya has been one of the key powers or key shaktis of Parashiva. Okay. So these, once we understand these, we know that why our systems were a sustainable model of education. Because it is designed to live or preach living in harmony with not only the fellow human beings, but also others. Therefore, it ensures everyone to be endowed with what is required. And in this pursuit, to live in harmony with the rest of the natures, with the right skills, without disturbing the balance around him. So we would look at our traditional practices, the way we treated the trees, the forests, the river bodies, and others. We would know that it was not merely in education, but also the education was part and parcel of one's practice or one's worldview, the way he interacted with it. So, this is the right education brings a kind of a right education, you can call it as a Siksha Samskara. It brings about the Manaviya Drishti, as we can say, no, a worldview of a humane worldview. A person with a humane worldview, he would be driven by Manaviya Mulya value systems. So the conduct, it will be reflected in his conduct. And that would lead to a Karya Vyavastha, the entire society which works on humane principles. A society or a culture or a civilization which is driven by this lofty goal of achieving a harmony. So this was the ultimate aim of our knowledge system. So how did they achieve? This is this was achieved in each and every discipline that they practiced. So to understand how, I wish to take an example of what it would mean for a painter of, let's say, an Ajanta or any other ancient, for example, the big temple of the Tanjore. There are very beautiful fresco paintings. So, what was a painter endowed with? See, there are, when we look at painters, we are looking at creators of painting, not imitators. So, what was a creator expected to be endowed with? He was expected to be endowed with, obviously, the skills, the materials, and the procurement of the material so that he knows the nuances of getting the right shades and others. Then he should know the immediate context of the work and its application. Then largely he should understand the vision with which the entire painting has been commissioned. And once he knows this, then he produces the masterpiece. Just I'll just take one example. There is one beautiful Dakshinamurti panel in Tanjavur. So the others, like for example, the kind of colors you use. So you have vegetable dyes, you have mineral dyes which were used, and also metallic. So they would have to know the science of extraction of the colors. It was a skill by itself. To tell you uh, how difficult it might have been, in the Rakhigadhi, which is one of the Harappan sites, they had discovered quite a few ceramic pottery shreds. The most surprising fact that there were 22 shades of blue alone. So these 22 shades of blue, especially ceramic, wherein you have to heat it at such high temperatures and still that should not lose its the intended color, would have required a good amount of technological uh, knowledge that they possessed. So, a painter would require the knowledge of extraction so that he gets the right shades or this thing, about the materials, preparing the fresco for the wall and kind of thing. So, that is the about the skills required. Then it is Dakshinamurti. So, what are the features? Why is uh, he to be drawn on the southern wall of the temple? What is the cultural context? So, if he has to be depicted, who all should be depicted along with him? So, that is then he understands the vision of the person who has done this, Rajaraja. He is creating this based on an agama by name Makutagama. So he should understand what Makutagama has to speak about the highest principle, about the tattva. So he should have the vision of the tattva of the agama so that he presents the representation and uses the colors appropriately, the bhava reflected appropriately, yet make it aesthetically appealing. Everything was achieved. So an artist was supposed to have skills, science, and the wisdom. And it was handed down generations through the system in which they were trained. So this is why we call that Indian systems were top down, because they were expected to have information to whatever extent required about multiple subjects, multiple areas, so that there could be a sense of an harmony, and there could be a sense of so by covering the different domains of knowledge, you would have a holistic perspective. Whereas mostly the Western knowledge system today can be equated with the bottoms up model, wherein one specializes or on a group or a subgroup of a knowledge domain. Both have their advantages and both have their disadvantages as well. But the point being made here is that a top-down model gives an opportunity for a very holistic perspective that one gains in each and every activity that he pursues. So education was a tedious process, yet it was undergone by each individual so that he could contribute meaningfully to the society. So this is how the yeah, okay. So we look at the hierarchical scheme of Vidya. So these are the three things that I was mentioning. The kala, which is the art, and the skill set required, practical crafts, they were the kalas. 64 kalas. So the list of 64 is not something that is agreed upon, which means that the kalas were evolving, the crafts were evolving, which is quite natural. Whereas the sciences or the Vidyasthanas were 14 or 18, as the case may be. They were built on an underlying philosophy which was to be understood through experience or through upasana. So it is an anubhava based. So the Paravidya, which is the top, it trickles down through the 14 Vidyasthanas and percolates all the way down to the 64 kalas or the skills. So this was reflected in the ancient system. Now, from a very practical point of view, the classification is done as Trayi Varta Dandaniti. This is how Arthashastra classifies knowledge. So Kautilya in his Arthashastra, he says a king or an administrator should be equipped with Trayi, Varta and Dandaniti. Trayi is the study of the Vedas and its auxiliary sciences. Varta is all practical arts, which includes agriculture, commerce. And Dandaniti is the science of governance, or how to ensure that the contracts are kept. See, that was the definition of Dandaniti. Today, people look at the word Danda and immediately assume that Dandaniti means military science. No, the word Dandaniti, as defined by Arthashastra, is the means or measures to enforce the contracts in place. So it has a much larger connotation. And a military intervention is just one of them. Having enlisted the three, finally, Kautilya says that one should be equipped with Anvikshiki. Now, what is Anvikshiki? The first three may look at, we may look at the first three as what to study. And Anvikshiki was a science of how to study. And Kautilya says that Anvikshiki is that lamp which lights up the entire world of scriptures. So without Anvikshiki, one would not have the right understanding of the world. So Anvikshiki is not a text or a book. Anvikshiki is that methodology to approach the various sciences, various arts. So it employs different forms of logic. It employs numerical logic, as in Sankhya. It employs psychological and also empirical logic. So Anvikshiki was the key to understand the Shastras. So not only was the systems defined, but how to approach the systems were also made very clear. I am going to skip this for now. Later, when the time permits, we can look into it. But just to make a mention, a very quick mention, this entire system was reflected all the way down in the various legends, or the, I shouldn't say word myth, because it sounds a bit fictitious account, about the various stories about people and places. And in this, an information was hidden. And information was, or the science behind it, was very carefully encapsulated with the story, so that the story makes it interesting for someone to understand the science or the actual event that happened. The best example is the legend of the Satisar and the flow of Jhelum. So there is one account which obviously from the geological point of view we have, and there is an account which is found in Puranas such as Nilamata Purana, one of the principal Puranas which speaks about the various aspects of Kashmir. Then even Kalhana mentioning it as to how the Jhelum flew. So if you may take it as an exercise, you can read these two and you can draw your comparisons and see how uh, uh, the event or the science was encapsulated by a legend around it. So coming to the major sources of the knowledge systems, we have primarily three sources. So oral sources, literary sources, and the material sources. So what is an oral source or an oral tradition? Very, very important, because the emphasis on the oral tradition was immense. We knew that the older education system of the Veda was completely oral. It was only as late as 100 years that the Vedic texts were printed. Till that time, they were handed over by a student, by a teacher to a student through oral transmission only. So the entire Vedic corpus was committed to memory. And this is true not merely for the Vedic corpus, but for the others. But especially Vedas, because a lot of other systems were developed around it to keep this oral tradition alive. Whereas for others, when the art of writing and all those became very popular, and oral was merely to ensure a kind of an uh, correlation between or a collaboration between the written material and uh, uh, the uh, the the art of learning that system. But the Vedas were especially emphasized to be kept in the oral tradition only, and it continues to be done so. Even now, if someone has to be recognized as a traditional scholar of Veda, then it is dependent on how much he has committed to memory, how much can he recall, and how much can he. Uh, yes, Vijay. Can I? I will come complete as usual, and I think we'll take that questions in another 5 minutes. I'll complete. So oral tradition has been the important one. The written, obviously, we know the way it has. India has a rich manuscript tradition, multiple scripts and multiple materials and all that. And another written source about Indian knowledge system are foreign accounts, foreign translations. You'll be surprised many of the texts were recovered from the Chinese and the Tibetan translations, which were considered lost in India because of the political situation that was prevalent here. So these are also treated as primary or secondary sources. Like translations from Chinese and Tibetan are still treated at par with the primary sources, and foreign accounts and other accounts are treated as secondary sources to know about India and uh, its conditions. Third is the material or the archaeological sources from which we can know about, I guess, coins and a lot of inscription. And to be very honest, not much in the education curriculum speaks about inscriptions, but inscriptions are such a rich source of information about the society and about the practices, and it will dispel so many myths that are prevalent. So, for example, you see this classic seal of Pashupati from the Harappa. You will be surprised to see the rhinoceros, single-horned rhinoceros here. I am moving this. Now, rhinoceros is found in the Assam region, which is north towards the northeast. And Harappans, as a civilization, uh, it was on the Saraswati and the Sindhu river basins. So this material source should have been enough to call or to say that the Harappans, not only were they uh, they're true representative of what we call as a collective India today, but they were the natives, and the script at the top now, it is it has been proved that it the language represented by the script is close to the Vedic Sanskrit. So the material and the archaeological sources also contribute to our understanding. So yeah, same thing. So just to summarize, we have both the Sanatana Dharma sources, the Vedic sources, and the other Dharmic sources, which we mentioned during the course, Buddhist and the Jain courses. Apart from this, there are certain regional sources also which we should not ignore. there are tribal knowledge systems, which are part and parcel or which are inspired by the Vedic system, but they are treated apart from the mainstream because of the difference in the narratives. So the regional systems are there. Similarly, the oral traditions are not just the Vedas, but the others, even folk songs, um, and the storytelling traditions, the katha traditions. All these are oral traditions, which are very, very important. For example, I was just mentioning there is a kummi is a type of a song. With this, I will close. Kummi is a kind of a song that is prevalent in parts of Tamil Nadu, which is sung by the women folk during field and field work and others. So in 1871, uh, there was a cyclone uh, that had its landfall, and it traveled all the way from the Tamil Nadu across Karnataka, went into Kerala, and then went into the Arabian Sea. So it originated in the Bay of Bengal and went into the Arabian Sea. Now, in 1871, a Kummi song records the travel of the uh, uh, the path of the cyclone. So this is a something that we could not get from any other source. So we have the oral sources were considered to be very rich and original source for understanding the knowledge systems. So with this, we'll close this session. In the next, we will look into the proper uh, uh, sections of the Vedic systems, and also about uh, the introduction to the various modes of classification, whether it is an Chaturdasha Vidyasthana model. What are the models of classifying the knowledge? So I'm open to we can take questions.
Excellent. Vijayji, you had a question. You can participate now. Yeah, go ahead, please.
Thank you, sir. My question, actually, I have a clarification question and then another question. Clarification question: you talked about the lots of these sources, and most of them are from like 2,000 years ago. You know, even Chanakya and all, 2,000 years ago. And then you talked about the tops down nature of most of the Vedic and subsequent kind of sources. Uh, but then you also talked about this, like the folk or indigenous, tribal kind of sources. Are those bottoms up or are those also tops down? I mean, and do you think that tantras that also came from like all over the country, all over the subcontinent, those are also tops down or are they bottoms up?
So I think the tops up, when we refer to as a tops up, we are looking at uh, the approach to education per se. So I think our approach to education has been the tops down rather than the bottoms up. Uh, like I mentioned, not merely the skill or how was emphasized, but why was also equally emphasized, for which they were required to have the immediate perspective and the larger perspective.
Okay, so the other question that I have, thank you about that. Other question I have is about, like I said, most of the stuff that you talked about is like 1,000, 2,000 years old. But you did talk about the foreign sources coming from Tibet and China and all, which are more contemporary. But when Kashmir Shaivism came and Abhinavagupta did the integration, he did the integration of all these Vedic sciences with the Tantric. And would you say that the Tantric sources were these tribal ones, and the which were not really well documented and stuff? And he integrated that, and that happened about 1,000 years ago. How come that did not get institutionalized in formal education in the country, in the sense that today, for example, there are no universities where they really teach that integration aspect of Tantra and Veda. That was actually accomplished by Abhinavagupta and other acharyas from that era. So what do you think about that? And, like today, for example, much of that, being a Sanatan Dharma, much of that should be applicable today. And it's not finding, it's not finding that education is not really being done for the contemporary kind of a situation where the challenges are there today, how that applies. So all of that, it has not gone into the top-down holistic education today. And for example, Abhinavagupta has no mention almost in the contemporary teaching of Indic philosophy in universities.
Yes, sir. So I do get the question. Then I will just try to answer it quickly in three parts. How was the Tantra viewed from the hardcore Vedartha point of view? There were three opinions prevalent. One which equated Tantra with the Veda. So it is Samya. We call it as a Samya, wherein Tantra is seen as equivalent to Veda when it comes to the authority. The second opinion that was prevalent was that the Veda is the superior source from which the Tantra draws the information. So here the Vedic sources are put above the Tantric sources. So if and when there is a conflict, the Vedas would prevail over the Tantra. The third was the reverse of the second, wherein the Tantras are said to be the secret or the Guhya Shastras, whereas the Vedas were called as a Samanya Shastras. So Samanya is general, and the exception will always prevail over the general. So three opinions were prevalent about the tantric or the agamic material, and Acharya Abhinavagupta did magnanimous work of integrating the tantric thing. And the moment we say tantra or tantric, we should remember it is a larger term that also includes the agamas. So even though the text is called as a Tantra Loka, a lot of material that we speak or we study under the Tantra or under the Kashmir Shaivism is from the Agamic sources. So Agama and Tantra are the terms that are interchanged. So the Agamas were very much in practice in India, even like 300-400 years before Acharya Abhinavagupta. We have inscriptional records to prove that the Agamas were not only popular, but they were the ones that would dictate the practicing religion, if we would be able to use that term. So, how did the Vedartha Darshana see the Tantra? Three. But how did it see the Pratyabhijna as a school of thought? Unfortunately, I have the same complaint that you mentioned. I don't have an immediate answer for it. I would only see this as an attempt of seeing the darshanas in a very, very, what can I say, in a very, very contracted perspective. The darshanas need to have a much larger perspective. And if I have your permission, I will just show an alternate view of the Tantra, of the darshanas, which is quite different from the classification of darshanas under the 6 schools that is normally done. Just give me a minute. So this is an alternate view um, which we are trying to say is uh, the right way to understand and approach the darshana, not to see that under that Shaddarshana scheme of Nyaya, Yoga, Vaisheshika, Sankhya, because it's so limited. So this is again six, but each of the six division further gives rise to another six divisions within itself. So there are like 36 systems that needs to be looked into under the scheme of darshanas. So this is a more comprehensive approach-based classification. So when we say Nastika Darshana, it is an approach that they have taken towards the Veda. When we say Prakritika Darshana, under which we have the Shaiva Darshanas and others, how does it view the reality? How does it view the world? When we say Prapannacharya Darshana, what is the approach to the moksha? So it is through the prapati, through the surrender to the teacher. So there we have all the bhakti schools of so this is an alternate thing. So I do agree with you. The current system is biased and has not taken the larger viewpoint.
Yeah, and whereas, if that strength and that what is missing, the gaps that are missing right now, were integrated, it would, and because this philosophy from 1,000 years ago was more householder based, which was more, living in the
Yes.
world kind of a
Yes.
thing. So if that were integrated as you are suggesting, and had percolated down to contemporary times, it would have been able to really provide a structure for educating for the contemporary world, where everybody is, very few people are actually in this sannyasic kind of a mood. They're all participating in the world, working, doing their day-to-day things. They would have been able to use this wisdom that has unfortunately not been integrated into the Indic thought or Indic structure, I would say.
I do completely agree because this is the dichotomy. Uh, all the Vedanta workshop people who attend, they are all either brahmacharis or grihasthas who have no business with Vedanta, even as per the qualification laid down by the founder of Advaita. By Vedanta, we are referring only to the Advaita Vedanta of Shankara. So there it is very, very clear. Unless you have renounced the world and you have turned yourself into a sannyasin, you have no business to enter into the Upanishadic knowledge. So I think it is a kind of a romanticism that Vivekananda brought in to Vedanta per se, that it has resulted in this state of affairs wherein we lose the sense of purpose. It was not so 100 years back. Vedanta was not looked into with this perspective. They were more inclined to study Ramayana and Mahabharata because that gave them an much practical wisdom for the conduct of their daily life. And obviously, systems like Trika and others are Kashmir Shaivism, they are non-monastic. So it is something that we can align closely than the Advaita Vedanta.
Thank you for that elucidation. Thank you.
Great question, Vijayji, and wonderful, wonderful insight into how to kind of view the integrated view of Vedanta and the tantric shastras that we have. I have one little question here, Shekharji. How can we access these complex ideas as stories that can be shared with kids so that just like they, growing up, we imbibe Mahabharata and Ramayana as stories, and and then that gave us a framework to think about our shastras. Are there stories about these 36 darshanas that can be taught to kids? Because we also know about Panchtantra and similar short stories that teach us some moral principles. Is there any literature which is in the form of short stories that illustrate the principles that these 36 darshanas describe?
I don't think anything is available. First of all, this 36 darshanas itself is a new scheme.
I see.
Not everyone know it's there. The systems are there, but this systematization is something unique, which is something under proposed, or you can say for the last 25, 30 years, few people have been talking about viewing the darshanic classification differently.
I see. And do you think there are scholars who might be pursuing writing like contemporary literature, which will probably illustrate some of these ideas more simply for kids?
I think we should explore. I am not sure. I have come across, but yes, I think that's exactly what we have to do. And for the stories, we don't have to look elsewhere. All we have to look is the local Sthala Puranas and Mahatmyas and other sections. They are the richest source for such legends.
I see. And connect them
It
to
is
the
only to view them in a different perspective.
right, right. Makes sense. All right. If there are no more questions, I think it's time to wrap up today's session. So let me thank Shekharji. Thank you so much. And it's once again a wonderful session. And Vijayji, thank you for very brilliant questions. These are insightful questions. And thanks to everyone who attended online as well as who would be watching this offline. Namaskar.